everybody, and welcome to Untethered.tv. I'm your host and founder, Rob Woodbridge. This is that place you come to find out the ins and outs of the mobile business arena. Trying to figure out what your business should be doing, trying to figure out some lessons that other people have learned so that you don't have to go through those lessons yourself. Well, mostly. This is also the place where you get some ideas. This isn't the place where you steal the ideas and mimic them into your own business. This is where you acquire ideas to mold them into the way that you think would be appropriate for your business. Don't steal these ideas, learn from them. So we are in the middle of this transformation in a lot of industries as a result of mobile. But you know what? It's funny. I don't think that any industry is going through such a transition, maybe the retail industry, but any other industry is going through an opportunity like we are seeing today, but the survey and data collection industry. Come on, everything that we do, everywhere we are, every time we open up the device, every time we ask a question, every time we take a survey, that data is going into a huge cloud spot. It is being assimilated. It is being diced, sliced, and we are finding patterns and trends. Data is the new gold rush, and the folks that are building the surveys, that are building the tools that go out and collect that data, whether passively or actively, are probably the new panhandlers, the new guys that are equipping these panhandlers with the tools to be able to do the things that they need to do. Data is king. And to that extent, got a great guest today to talk about a lot of this stuff around data collection, trends that are happening. Do we need surveys? We're going to cover all of this, and it's all around this great mobile space that we love so much. And with me today is Guy Rolfe, who is the mobile practice leader at Kantar Mobile. Now, Kantar is an internal provider of market research services to the Kantar Group, which in turn is the world's largest insight, information, and consultancy network. And he is we're talking across the pond. He's in Warwick in the UK. Guy, thank you for doing this. What an introduction. I've already spoken too much. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Hi. Thank you for inviting me.
So, before, I gave a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about, as you heard. But before we really dive into this, I think some context for what it is. What is Kantar Mobile? What is the Kantar Group? How does this all fit into this? What do you guys do? Why don't you start there?
Yes. Okay, right, good question. So Kantar Group is really a holding company name for lots of individual brands of market research companies. From TNS, Milbrown, the Futures Company, and then some specialist units like Kantar Media, Kantar Retail, and so on. So while each of those businesses will have their own priorities and their own plans for products, offers, solutions, and they'll have their own development teams, we centrally within Kantar wanted to make sure that we had an expert team that understood these technologies and had in place core capabilities that would enable us to then build and leverage new offers and solutions. So Kantar Mobile was formulated earlier in 2012 and sits within a central function, which is Kantar Operations, which has built out mobile capabilities for both survey-based work and also for passive data collection. And then we leverage all of these capabilities to help TNS, Milbrown, Kantar Media, Kantar Retail, and Added Value, and so on, to leverage their offers and their solutions for their clients.
So, I mean, where was, is survey, it's an interesting question. I'm not really sure that I'm going to ask it properly, but is surveying sexy? You know what I mean? I'm a data geek, guys. So you had me at hello, right? You take all this data and it's what you do with that data. But most of us have this vision of somebody with a clipboard, the old school clipboard and standing there. Hey, do you have a few minutes to answer a few questions? And how has this industry progressed as a result of these devices that we're carrying with us? It must be like Christmas.
Yes, absolutely. So I was at the Mobile Marketing Association in Istanbul yesterday, presenting on that and trying to give some indication for what's going to happen over the next couple of years. So this is how I described it. Market research stemmed from a conceptual idea in the 1920s, which was around the advertising boom and the golden age of radio in the USA. When they realized that there was significance around demographics from sponsoring radio spots. For 80 years following that, we had a market research model that was questions and answers. And then it changed in the late 90s, early 2000s, when internet research came along. And suddenly we had a new model. So internet research took off because there were cost savings, there were quality improvements, because there was no interviewer bias. So there were other reasons why it took off. However, the importance is the model changed. No longer was it questions and answers. Now you could behaviorally track what somebody was doing, and it was no longer self-reported research. That, at the time, had controversial elements to it. There were those traditional researchers that didn't like that. There were people that called that data mining and said that's not market research. Now we've got ourselves into the cusp of the mobile phenomenon, and we're repeating it all over again. And now we are trying to collect data from all these different types of devices, and it's not just mobile phones. It's going to be from smart TVs. It's going to be from our refrigerators. It's going to be from our cars, and so on. And that is a big challenge for us, and it's also comes with a lot of responsibilities. And I probably used the wrong way of summarizing that yesterday in Istanbul, because I used a Greek titan, Prometheus. Now, bearing in mind the Greeks and the Turks don't get on very well, it was probably the wrong place to quote him. But Prometheus said that the challenge was how we're going to manage this new fire, and that's what I am referring to all of this data about is a new fire. And the challenge for us is data obesity. We're going to have so much data, we don't know what to do with it. So we need to determine that, and then the responsibility is how do we make sure that we are acting responsibly and ethically with that data. So researchers of tomorrow, or you could argue researchers of today, have to have different skill sets than traditional researchers. We now need researchers that understand digital ethics, that understand privacy, and it's not just about understanding how to design a good survey and having questionnaire and analytics and data processing skills.
Well, I mean, I want to explore that just a little bit, because it's so fascinating, right? And this is where the geekiness comes out in this, because it's not just as simple as putting up a survey anymore, is it? Because of the nature of what it is, the data, the kind of data that we can collect everywhere and on everybody, and from multiple forms. You can do video recording, audio recording, photos. You can do all of these things that might seem natural, but you're right. I mean, depending on the culture, depending on the country, depending on the city, depending on what kind of questions you're asking, each one of those things can have an impact on what you can do with that data, how you use that data. And so this is all of a sudden gone from a simple thing where you take a piece of paper and you stand there and you engage with contact with that person, and you're only touching a fraction of the number of people that you really should be touching, right? To a global phenomenon where you have to worry about the laws of those countries, don't you? All of a sudden it became complex. That's what this technology has done, hasn't it? It made a simple thing very complex. Is that right?
That's the way of the world, though, isn't it? As we make technological advancements, it comes with complications. You're absolutely right. It does, and I don't think any of us are going to claim to have all the answers to that. And that's what we need to collectively learn. And we also need to I don't really want to use the word self-regulate, because that makes it sound a bit too. But in a way, we have to, because if we don't, then you're going to get some serious violations or serious mistakes, which we've already seen in the way that mobile data is being used. Last year, April last year, Apple had their wrist slapped, and Steve Jobs had to apologize for the fact that iPhones and iPads were collecting location data, storing it on their devices, unencrypted. Wasn't just Apple though. Google and Microsoft also admitted that they did the same. At the end of last year, we had Carrier IQ, where a junior amateur analyst had discovered that it was capturing certain types of data. Actually, by the end of all of that, Carrier IQ were, I believe, cleared, and it was actually found to be some code that was being left in the Android, but the damage was still done. Handset manufacturers and operators still removed Carrier IQ software from their devices. So, and all of those things, of course, really damage the consumer perception of what we're doing. So, and this was also a debate at the SMR Digital Conference 2 weeks ago in Amsterdam, and we recognise the fact that Facebook, Google, and Twitter and the likes are unlikely to ever join market research organisations and follow through the same principles and ethics in the way in which we've worked. So that's also a really big challenge at the moment for our industry. Is just collectively, how do we all work together with those same principles?
Well, and it's interesting because you're right. It's if we harken back to the olden days where Microsoft was a dominant player. Microsoft didn't participate in a lot of these, privacy groups or non-governmental groups in order to be able to, because they could exert their influence as a monopoly. And you see that with companies like Facebook, companies like Google, billion users in Facebook, and arguably the #1 search engine that collects data every moment of every waking minute of our lives in Google. These things become juggernauts. But I think the big thing that you brought up very clearly was this idea of data spoiling over time, right? So we collect so much data, and that data all of a sudden, it's what data do we collect and how do we use that is the important thing. But a lot of people are collecting data today that they're just collecting it and they're not even using it, and it just spoils. But there are huge risks with that, aren't there?
So you said earlier in your opening statement that data is the new oil, or something to that effect, and I agree with you. And anybody who's collecting data is looking for ways to monetize it. So look at companies. So there are several different epicenters I see where that's happening. So it's happening in store loyalty data. So look at dunnhumby, who manage store loyalty data for Tesco's and the like. We're starting to see it in financial institutions. We're starting to see it with mobile carriers. We're seeing it with social media, Facebooks and Googles and so on. So it's happening. And these for these kind of new bedfellows, if you like, there are two challenges. One is, what data do I have? Because for organisations like them, it's not as if they've got all this data sitting in one nice little box somewhere on the server, which they can just go, oh look, this is great, we'll just run some charts on it. Yeah, this is data. Yeah, that's right. It's not that simple. This is data that's spread across many different networks in many different countries, and they've got to piece it together. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is then, what do we do with this data and what can be used for? So there's a whole monetization of it. And then thirdly is, what opt-ins, what permissions do I need from our customer base to be able to do that? And not only what opt-ins, what permissions from our customer base do we need, then there's also, what are the implications for my business if we start doing this? Because none of these businesses are going to want to in any way harm or bring any risk to their day-to-day customer base.
When you look at this must be like a, from an outside perspective, when I look at the tools that all of a sudden you have been equipped to use from a mobile device and from auxiliary data that comes from that mobile device, location, time of day, temperature, whatever it is. There's a lot of inference that happens there. This must be like, you guys must be like kids in a candy store thinking like, because this has enabled so much more than you could possibly have imagined. Is that the way that you view this? Is that, because it's a double-edged sword. You got to worry about the legality of how you use that and the protection of how you use that data and what you're allowed to collect versus the fact that you can do so much, whereas 10 years ago you couldn't. Is that significant for you guys?
Yes. Okay. So I think there are probably two lines of thought. There are those, as you just said, there are kids at a candy store and the excitement on what's now possible, and I'd put myself in that camp. And then I'd say there are the more traditionalists, where a lot of research has been done over years and has the normative databases, or there are some kind of trending and trends that are required, and those kind of traditionalists are probably really scared. What does this mean for them? So I would say that there are two band camps very much, and and I'm definitely in the excited arena, but it comes with challenges, and those are the challenges that we're all trying to deal with and address at the moment.
Well, I mean, so those companies that have asked the same question now for 100 years and have trended that across the that 100 years and have become the de facto expert on that. I mean, how do they look at this? This is obviously going to be a challenge to their business, because now that question can be answered by not even asking the question. I'm sure of it. So how do those guys deal with this transition? And do they? And are you about to see, the uprooting of the old guard because of what's going on? First with web, which was still controllable, but now with mobile, which is kind of, there's a lot of data that's being collected automatically.
That's right. So with okay, where do I start with that one? Firstly, anybody who chooses to ignore mobile and chooses to ignore these new ways and how we can passively collect these different behavioural data sets, ignore that at your peril, really, because it's where the world's going. And what we're seeing at the moment is that we're starting to introduce it more and more to a lot of different research projects we're doing. If that means doing old alongside new in parallel, so be it. Or we're just starting fresh out, exploring this with clients, and then we'll look at how it can compare back into old later. However you take your approach, it's about just getting out there and doing it, and seeing what you can do with it.
Well, I mean, what kind of trends are you seeing then? Those companies that don't see the power in this, which I would assume there can't be many of them out there, and at some point there won't be any of them out there if they are that mind. But what kind of trends are you seeing in this whole process as a result of mobile? Like this is an enabling technology. What are you seeing out there that you guys are following, watching with a keen eye?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there are two parts to this. One is you already hit upon the idea of asking less questions. So yes, I think you're right. If you think about the volume of surveys that any large research company does, there's a certain amount of questions that are repeated or generic. And we want to make sure that we can minimize those kind of questions and make sure we're asking more relevant questions that are based on an actual behavior that we've observed from a respondent or panelist. That will also help us to overcome other problems that our industry is having, which is with reducing response rates and declining participation in our kind of survey. So this should make it much more relevant, much more exciting for the respondent, and also then enables us to be using real behavioural data, which we know is more accurate, and also will enable us to turn around what we think research potentially quicker and really get into the moment of when something is relevant. So those are the two patterns. So it's more about reducing survey length, bringing in real behavioural data rather than going for self-reported data, also improving the experience for the respondents so that we can start to overcome quality and participation concerns.
I gotta ask, you guys have, how long has Kantar been around, the group, Kantar Group?
Oh goodness me! Right, that's an on-the-spot question. Yeah, a long time. So since the 80s.
Since the 80s. So you've obviously lived through these transformational technologies like the desktop computer, the internet, and now mobile, right? So you've seen these waves. How does a company like Kantar migrate this or navigate this minefield, right? So that you put. I can only imagine, and Guy, we didn't talk about this before, but I just keep thinking about this, is that, you put all of your effort into, okay, this type of collection, this type of data collection, and this type of surveying, and it involves everything to do with faxes and PCs, and then the internet comes along, and you have to then take this, like it's a hard thing. You've built this organization up here, you take it, and then you shift it over to the internet, and you're like, okay, now it's like internet, faxes, PCs, right? And then 10 years later, it's like, okay, now it's mobile and it's devices and tablets, and then it's internet, and then it's no faxes, and then the PC is where you do all the crunching, or you've taken that out and it's up to the cloud. What does that do to an organization when it kind of goes through those 10-year cycles of just like, I don't know, like uprooting pain to change their business? I mean, that's got to be a challenge in this industry as the technology unfolds like it does.
Yes and no.
Good.
Yes, it is. Of course, it is a challenge. But then, for an organisation as big as ours, I'd say that challenge never stops.
Yeah.
So we've been on that same challenge for the last 20 years or so. So because the world runs at different speeds. So just because Europe and North America have been online since 1998 or whenever, it doesn't mean that Latin America, Africa, and Asia have been. So this challenge has never really stopped for us. We're still, over the last 5-10 years, we've been looking at ways in which we can bring Africa, Asia, Latin America more online. And actually now what's going to happen is that they're going to go mobile first, as everyone's been talking about. So what's happened is our efforts haven't changed. The amount of resources and people we have looking at this haven't changed, but it's just the direction that they're taking has changed. So it's about making sure that we adopt mobile and we adopt these changes in consumer behaviour at the right time. Because if you adopt them too early, so for example, if we try to build mobile panels in a market too early, where there's not going to be demand to want to use it, then you've wasted your time, because you're going to end up losing that panel, and you're going to end up re-recruiting it later. So nobody wants to invest ahead of time, but it's all important then to not be behind time. So choosing when to do it is as important as making the decision to do it in the first place.
How did you guys do that? I mean, the internet was an interesting thing because it was a gradual ramp, right? Some of us were started using it in the late 80s, early 90s, right? Where it almost seemed like it was like one person at a time would get on, right? Because it was a complicated process back in the dial-up days, and you had to go through a process. But then it flourished in the late 90s, and it.
If I'm
Say that again. Sorry.
I was going to say so. I'm just going to add a little bit of insight to that.
Okay.
So, I remember when the internet was taking off, and I was actually working in a part of Kantar where we were actually handling some of the requests that we were seeing coming in from clients, and it started slow, but literally within a month or two, it was piling in and piling in and piling in, to the point where there was a genuine struggle to keep on top of it. The growth was faster than anybody expected, and in the very early days, I'm talking here, and because normally when you get a shift or a change in a business, you normally can account for it and you can plan for it, but nobody had planned for that growth in internet.
No, when was that though? So those were the early days. What years were those?
Yeah, so we're probably talking around 2001, 2002, those sort of days, maybe 2003.
It just shifted.
Those sort of days where it just suddenly, there was a year or two of just slow, trial and error, and then there was a period of about 4 months where it just suddenly, it was like somebody switched on the tap, and the plug was in, and we started overflowing. And then
for mobile, what was that like?
There was a reason. So the reason online went like that so quick was because there was significant cost savings for the clients, and at that time every single client was under pressure to save money, and so that was really why it was so fast. For mobile, clients aren't seeing anywhere near as much potential cost saving as they did by going online. If anything, mobile is the same kind of price, or potentially, certainly in markets that are already online, it is possibly a little bit more expensive, because you've got to remember that surveys that are scripted and created to run on the internet, they just have to be built once to be supported in one or two generic browsers. For mobile, you've got to create technology that will work on Androids, on iPhones, on Blackberries, on Symbians, on Windows. So all those different versions means expensive overhead from a developer point of view. So it's difficult to be able to make that cheaper than online. But the advantages of using mobile are not about cost. The advantages are about getting data that you just would not otherwise be able to get, and getting it timely. The other advantage, and the other thing about mobile as well that we're really excited about, is what we touched upon a bit earlier, which is less on the survey side, but it's about joining together these different data sets that we can get from different types of wirelessly connected devices. And I think the combination of this passive behavioral data with targeted specific surveys being deployed or served to a respondent in the moment or at a relevant, timely way is what is going to be powerful for the future.
So let's talk about that. I mean, I love that. I think the perception of the internet was that it was a gradual steam that was gaining momentum, and it was just, through the early 90s and mid 90s, people used it, but they didn't understand it, and they used it and they used it and they used it, and then all of a sudden, you're right. The catalyst was, oddly enough, after the .com explosion or implosion in Silicon Valley and around the world, where people actually found value in this as a cost savings or as a marketing tool. And you're right, 2001, 2002, bad for investments, great for adoption of the internet. But then what happened, when with mobile, all of a sudden you looked up and there was 5 billion devices connected around the world, and they were clamoring for this kind of stuff, right? So one was a real push. It took 10 years to push it out there, to give birth to the internet era, basically. And then in mobile, it's like the consumers were waiting for us to provide them with the tools because they already had the devices. And it just seems like there was a push-pull thing here happening with mobile, and I love that.
Yeah.
But, there is that reach aspect of this that could never have happened, right, with mobile. And you touched on it, which was timing of this, which is so important, because typically what you would do is you would have a survey, you'd go to an event, for example, or you'd be asked your opinion on some a global trend or something to that extent. They would send you to a website, you would fill out your survey and you'd submit it. But mobile has that, you said it, the real-time ability for interaction to ask the one right question at the one right time, where that person is more not only able but apt to answer that question. That has got to have transformed the way you guys think about surveys. It's not about 10 questions. It could be just about one, right? It's a long way to ask that question, but
yeah, absolutely.
And what does that do for your business now? You have to be much smarter, I think.
You do. So we've been, you may have seen some of these case studies, and so we've been trialing what we call bite-sized chunks. And I know we presented this at the ARF at Casro in the US last year, and we've already started trialing this. We've got some more trials going to happen, where we're breaking lengthy surveys down into small chunks to understand if that can be done, if statistically that will work. Also, we're trying to do that to understand what respondents and what consumers find acceptable as being a survey length, a survey chunk. And at the moment, our experience and our findings are a little mixed, to be honest. But it's only, we only find out by experimenting and then trying this. So our first bite-sized chunks trial, we found actually that respondents sat and did, or most of the respondents sat and did most of the chunks all in one go, which wasn't what we were expecting. We were expecting people to do one or two chunks now and a couple later on. So we're redesigning that trial to do it a second time around, but we're making the chunks a bit longer. So we think that we've made the chunks too short. So it's about getting the balance. Now, what staggers me, and I think that's what we need to be mindful of here. We've all seen these facts around how many minutes a day people spend using apps and using their phones. So the last figure I heard was an average consumer spends 94 minutes a day using apps on their smartphone. 94 minutes, over an hour and a half, shocking. Now, that time, if you split up across the day, there'd be lots and lots of short 20-second, 50-second bursts, but then you'll have some bursts of 20 minutes or longer. And what we need to figure out is, do we want our surveys to be done in the short few second bursts, or do we want our surveys to be done in the 20-minute bursts? And it will depend on the type of survey that we're doing, and we are in the middle of doing various trials and pilots around that, and look forward to being able to publish and showcase the results from that.
Yeah, I would be really interested in this as a data guy. Your perception of what you just experienced, whether that's like if you're asking questions about an event, like a movie or a world event, the greater distance between you and that event, the different, I suppose, your opinion would be. Like, if you leave a movie theater and you're excited about the movie, that will dissipate by the next morning. So I guess there has to be a piece of timing that goes into this, right? That you kind of sacrifice something in order to be able to just get that data at the right time, and where the person is much more in the mode for releasing this. And it would strike me that this is a huge challenge for, like, as much as mobile has enabled. One of the questions I was going to ask you is that there are consequences to all this technologies we've talked about, but the consequence could be that the opportunity is that you can survey many more people, right, as a result of this. But the consequence is that maybe the data isn't as rich or isn't as deep as it once was when you had their full attention. Do you get that sense that that's going to happen?
I don't know. One of the challenges is about making sure you ask the question at the right time, because if you've just walked out of a cinema and as you've left that cinema, let's say, and you're walking back to your car and your phone beeps and you got a question, what did you think of that film you just saw? There's going to be an element of, God, that's too creepy. That's who's watching me? Who's watching me? What's going on? So we need to make sure that we're not overstepping the mark. Now, with opted-in panels, it makes life a bit easier, but that's overstepping the mark, we think. So it's about getting to the right moment, but it's also about not overstepping the mark. And then the other point you made there then about the challenge of can we get as rich data? I believe yes we can, because nobody's going to want to get less rich data.
It won't work.
Otherwise it's not going to work, is it? No. So it's the same or even richer insight, but being collected in more efficient and more, I think, more trustworthy and more high quality ways.
What about, you said it, that we spend an inordinate amount of time inside of apps in increments of maybe 30 to 90 seconds, sometimes 20 minutes, which is typically Angry Birds if you're the average human that has a smartphone. What about, and there's one thing to be said about those apps that people are using for a considerable amount of that time are the social media side, so the Facebook, Twitter, and public opinion. And a lot of answers to your questions find themselves through real-time social media output, so through Facebook statuses and Twitter posts. I mean, that's obviously another angle that you guys have to bring into the data, this disparate data source called social media. How important is that to gauging? It might be the equivalent to survey B-roll, but how important is that to validate what you're bringing in?
Okay, so it's still very important, but my personal perspective may be slightly different than many others. But I still see that there is a huge challenge of how you get to grips with that kind of social media data, and from what I can tell, it's still an incredibly manual process. I've not come across anybody yet who said, here's a software package, here's a text analytics package that will automate this or will somehow make my life nice and easy. I was at a conference a few weeks back where there was, I'm not going to name any names, but there was somebody who was talking about a really nice example of a piece of work that they had done, but they then said that they had to manually go through something like 3,500 responses made through social media sites in order to find the pieces of information and the nuggets or the gems that could help him create his story for the client. And there was a gasp, as you can imagine, from the entire audience at that point. And that's the struggle, and I don't see that we're going to get away from that in any time quick. So there's a time and a place. It's highly relevant, but I just don't see that it's going to be turned around or solved in any kind of immediate. I think that with mobile and with passive behavioural data, that challenge is a lot more clearer and a lot easier to find a solution and to implement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the two lessons that I just heard from you is, one is that just because you can doesn't mean you should, because there could be a cost and an effort in order to extract that data from the social stream, and it might be good, as I said, B-roll data, but it can become very costly in terms of time to be able to extract that. And the second thing is obviously that just because you can doesn't mean you should collect that data, because if you're not going to use it effectively, there's that tipping point where it just doesn't make any sense to do it at this point. But the second piece is that, hey, entrepreneurs out there, there's an opportunity that if you can satisfy this pain for these guys, that they might actually buy that product from you or license it from you. So there's opportunity out there. I know there's a whole bunch of companies playing in the space, but maybe you should reach out to Guy and get his insights and ask him what he's looking for, and there might be business there or something. I do have. I want to talk about the need for surveys. All of this leads to a point. I'm going to come back to that. We're going to finish off with that because I'm very interested to know. Here's a little teaser about. Is the era of the survey over because of the connectivity, this pervasive connectivity that we have? And I want to talk to you about that in a second. But first, you guys are what are the primary sponsor for market research in the mobile world, a conference that is coming up very, very, very soon. It's in Kuala Lumpur at the end of January, January 29th and to 31st. Talk about this, because this is this is obviously, you guys are actively involved in this. You have what, 5 speakers, including yourself, that are going to be up there. Give a sense of what it is that you're going to be talking about and some of the research that you guys are going to be releasing, some of the ideas that are going to be put out there.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we're really excited, looking forward to the event in Kuala Lumpur, and I think that of all of the events that we've run through the course of this year, that this one is going to be one of the most exciting, because Asia is a market in which I don't think that we've really, I'm talking as an industry, have really thoroughly and properly addressed. So highlights I'm looking forward to are going to be that we're going to be talking about case studies and real examples of work that we've done in the Southeast Asia region, where we've been using mobile. So I've just got hot off the press some case studies that we've just finished in the last few weeks, where we've been comparing different mobile services alongside the more traditional research services. And out in that region, it's either, when I say traditional, there are some markets that are online already, but there's a vast majority which is actually face-to-face. So we've got lots of case studies that we're going to be showcasing and talking about.
Is there one that you could draw attention to for the folks that are listening in right now that might entice them to come out and hear you guys speak about it? Is there anything that comes to mind? Not without giving. Don't give away the presentation. Like, we want people to pay for this because it's of value.
I don't know whether I might have given away too much already. I think all I'm going to say is that we have 3 or 4 good case studies, of which we're going to go through, describe, talk, and we're going to put them in. So we've got Tim Kelsall, who's presenting on behalf of Kantar Group, and he's going to be showcasing and talking about the excellence and expertise of all the different Kantar companies out in the region. And I know we've also got Mardine Drew from Kantar Operations, who's going to be talking about the innovation work that we've been doing. And so she's going to be particularly focusing on some case studies where we've been using voice analytics and facial recognition.
And voice analytics. I mean, can you go into a little bit of detail about that? Is that facial recognition for identification, so that you? Is that a form of identification? Talk about those 2 things. That's really fascinating. Or can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, facial recognition is nothing new. And we've published case studies in the past where we did some work using a technology in 2 companies that we invested some money in. So we did a project out in India. So this one's not new. This one's been talked about before, where we invested in Affectiva and a company called Lumi Mobile. We built a mobile app that combined the Affectiva technology, so that as consumers were doing things on their phone, consuming content on the screen of their phone, forward-facing camera was observing their face, and then using the Affectiva technology, we could see the sentiment of their enjoyment as they were watching that content or doing whatever it was they were doing. So on the facial recognition, what we've looked at is how we can take that further. Are there ways in which we might be able to route people to particular surveys based on the way they look? Okay, so simple things, for example, maybe there's no point doing a shampoo survey amongst somebody who's got no hair. Okay, so simple things like that. On the voice side, though, what we're looking at is how could we route somebody through a survey that could be voice controlled? Because we believe one of the things, how the way that consumers use their mobiles, the way that that's going to evolve over the next couple of years, we think there's going to be more voice control. So I know that at the moment a lot of people don't like the way the Sirius works on iPhones, saying that it doesn't work very effectively. I think we have to put that behind us. And I agree, no, that's not a great voice activated platform. But we have been doing some exploration around how we can use more reliable voice recognition to not only route people through surveys, but then also to be able to detect and pick up on the tone of somebody's voice to see what sentiment's in there. So a little bit like the facial recognition, being able to tell someone's sentiment, we're looking at the way that could apply to voice as well.
I've got to say, we'll come back to the conference in a second, but I've got to say that this is very fascinating. Did you ever sit back and think, when you started at Kantar, that this is where you would be getting into voice recognition and facial recognition, about trying to understand whether or not somebody's angry, sad, happy, and was that always in the vision, or like, do you get into one thing and then all of a sudden a technology explodes that enables all this stuff, and it kind of takes you on a different ride?
Well, no, never thought for a moment we'd be doing this, but market research has always been about being understanding of consumers and what consumers are doing today. And what we have found ourselves inevitably doing more of is making sure we stay ahead of the curves, making sure we understand all these different trends as they happen, and making sure that we address and communicate with consumers on their own terms and in ways that they're familiar and used to. So if consumers today are using Facebook and Twitter, if they are using voice-activated solutions, if they are doing online shopping, if they are doing wireless payments through their mobile phone, then we have to address and be on top of all of that. And who knows what we're going to be doing this time next year or in 2 years' time. We're probably not far away from we're going to have holographic interviewers or something that will pop out of your device, and so who knows? Exciting though, and who would have thought that as an industry, and so for anybody out there that's thinking about what industry to go into, market research is never a dull moment.
No, it's as we said, this has become the new currency, right? And it's the companies that can actually enable the tools that bring that data in, that can turn it into a currency, turn it into a value to businesses, countries, nations, governments, whatever it is. It's a benefit, and I think this is a new race going on. So if this fascinates you, and I mean it completely fascinates me, and we're gonna finish off our conversation with this big question about surveys in a second. But I would absolutely implore you to go and check out this conference that Guy and his team is going to be speaking at Market Research in the Mobile World. It's in Kuala Lumpur on January 29th to 31st. Obviously, Kantar is a huge sponsor. You should definitely check it out if you want to. Just go to mrmw.net to go and register for that, and you will hear more insight like what we're about to talk about right now. All right, Guy, we've talked about this, the different input mechanisms that you've got from these devices. Every single piece of a phone or a tablet can be used to gauge sound, to gauge air pressure, to gauge direction, distance, longitude, latitude, temperature, time of day. You can do fingerprint scanning, you can do facial recognition, audio recognition. You can do all of these things in this device, so that basically, and then you take into consideration a lot of these apps that we use on a day-to-day basis: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram with photos. Then how about Waze or any kind of GPS navigation tool that are either voice prompts or text prompts, or you type them in. So there's a lot of data that we're already inputting to this thing, right? Payments. I go into Starbucks, I go into any coffee shop or a restaurant, and at some point my wallet is going to be attached to my phone, and all of a sudden it's like it is the data mecca. Why do we still need surveys? Or do we still need surveys when all of that data is already being collected around us? I think that, for example, like census here in Canada, it's your obligation. It's a law. You have to fill out your census report when they send it to you. You have to mail it in by a specific day. But they already know all of that information about me, or it's available already. Why aren't they just tapping into sources to be able to do it? Why surveys?
It depends on what you're trying to research ultimately. So there are some areas where past behavior is well known to be the best way to create and understand and predict future behavior. And that's what any data miner would say to you. That's good if you want to be predicting purchase behavior, and so thinking about people's typical sort of brand and comms type of surveys. But if you want to do some concept testing, You can't really do concept testing around measuring passive behaviour, and that's where you need the attitudinal aspect. So there's always going to be a time and a place for both.
So, I would like that. That's a very succinct. My question was longer than the answer, which is typically the way that I always think. But I mean, you know that you're right. There are certain trends that they can say. Like we have, I mean, debit in Canada is incredible, right? It's widespread. Not a lot of people carry cash anymore. It's debit cards. So, and I know that based on my history and on the patterns, this is what you're saying is that the company that runs the debit system here in Canada, Interac, knows more about my spending behavior than I do. They'll be able to tell me what I'm going to have for lunch today based on the 15 years I've been using this system. So there's ways to predict that. But when it comes to really getting to the core of it, is the essence that we've seen a survey that may have been 15 questions and a little bit complicated to work through. Now it will be condensed down to 3 questions because through inference and through other things, we will know the other answers to the other 12? Am I simplifying this too much for you?
Well, let's start. Okay, so the truth is, I wish our surveys were only 15 questions. Our surveys, 40, 50, 60 questions. Okay, so the start point is like that. Where we're going to get to, I hope, is more like surveys of 15 questions.
All right.
Are we ever going to get to surveys of 3 or 4 questions? That maybe is being a little too ambitious, but I mean, ultimately, that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to get the surveys into these smaller chunks, and that is some of the work that we're doing now. Some of this we will be talking about in case studying, hopefully in time for MRMW, and if we look at changes in consumer behaviour, which is all about updating, tweeting, updating the status, we are consuming content, media content in chunks, and we as researchers have to address that. And the day of doing a 60-minute survey, they are numbered. They are numbered.
Yeah, nobody sits through a 60-minute television show in front of their TV anymore without pulling up a tablet. The idea of sitting in front of a 60-minute survey is a captive audience is what you do not have. So last kind of projection here for a little while. I don't want to ruin anything that you guys are going to be releasing at MRMW. So tell me if you can be very blunt if I'm asking that question. But we touched on a little bit this little future of where we're going. You must have an inkling of how this is going to play out for you guys, because you know that it seems like in 10-year cycles, your industry is being disrupted, or a new technology is coming in to help you guys, but adding more layers and sometimes more complexity to it. What do you guys see? So, aside from, holographic images and those kind of things, do you think that things like augmented reality are going to play into this? Do you think that how important are smartphones versus feature phones? I mean, where do you guys think that you should be in a couple of years in this space, without giving away the secret sauce, obviously?
Okay, again, there's lots of parts in there, so where should I break it down? I mean, firstly, so you mentioned, I suppose, these new players in the sector, in the industry. It's got to be healthy to have more new, exciting players in the industry, and any industry, I suppose, we've faced it more than anybody, and people have realised what a great monetization opportunity there is in terms of data, and where are we going to be in terms of the types of technology? What are the skills that we need? What's the only way any new technology is going to be a success within the way that we do market research is going to be the moment that technology has significant traction amongst consumers. So augmented reality is not going to have any real place in market research until there are millions and millions and millions of users of that technology. And we can be prepared for it, we can be trialing with it, we can be experimenting with it, but it's not going to be of any great value to broad mainstream market research until. So that's, I think, is and my hunch would be, we've already seen the biggest transformation our business is going to have, and that is the growth of mobile phones just over the last couple of years. Are we going to see another transformation as fast as that? Maybe not, but the world is just becoming more digital, and it's all these different devices wirelessly connected that we need to deal with and manage. When it comes to different ways to communicate, augmented reality is definitely going to be a communication method. And okay, so Google Glasses are what, maybe a year, 2 years away from being available on the mainstream market. So in 2 years' time, we're going to have to deal with that, and we're going to have to think about how our surveys, the way in which we communicate with respondents, can cope in that kind of environment.
So if you I love that, and there's going to be that, because at some point that data will come up. And I just love to kind of think a little bit forward here, is that in 2 years, should Google Goggles or whoever owns that database, because I think Google has a set of data that's interesting. I think companies like yours have a set of data that's much more interesting, right? Especially, I put on a pair of glasses, and somebody who has filled out any survey, and this is total, I mean, I'm just obliterating privacy law everywhere here as I think like a futurist. So don't correct me on this, because it's a panacea for me. But
it's a hypothetical.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I put my glasses on, and I bump into somebody, or I walk past somebody who has at some point filled out a survey, and I can see that information. I can get that data. It's much better than just pulling up their social profile and their last tweet and their last Facebook post, right? And the video they put up online about their kids. I know it's a privacy nightmare, and that will not happen. I would hope that never happens. But you start to see companies like yours playing in that space, in the augmented reality space, really has a bright future around data collection and actually analyzing that data. So I don't want to comment on that, because it is a privacy time bomb. But I do want to ask you, if you were an entrepreneur and you were looking at at your business right now, and somebody would come to you and say, if I wanted to sell to you, if I wanted to help you move this business along, you got any ideas for them about where they should focus in the mobile space? Like, is it an app-based thing? Is it like an automated survey creator? Is there anything that you can think of that you're thinking, this is a gap for us, we need this today, and I would pay to have that? You can say no, but I don't think, I'd say that there would be something.
If I'm honest, I would say that there are plenty of people out in the market today offering the technology to do surveys over mobile devices, and that if somebody phoned me up tomorrow and said, look, we've got this fantastic new way of doing surveys over a mobile device, that wouldn't make me get out of bed. There are plenty of people doing that. Challenges I see are how you actually acquire a respondent acquisition. That's especially out in markets like Africa and Asia. That's exciting. Now, there are plenty of people out there. Well, plenty is perhaps the wrong word. There are a handful of people out there who are doing that, and that I think is exciting. That I think is a big opportunity.
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's a good answer. I mean, everybody's doing surveys, and that's we see a lot of copycat action happening right now. So, I'm always interested to look at where the great opportunities, where your pain is, because instead of looking down 2 years and trying to build out something for Google Goggles or Google Glasses, it'd be really interesting to say, well, you know what, the immediate pain that we'd be willing to spend money on is this right today. So, it's interesting, because user acquisition, it's no different in any business, is it? Yeah.
True. That's right.
All right. So, listen, Guy, where should we send people for more information about you guys and about Kantar? Should we send them just to kantaroperations.com? Is that the best place to go?
It is indeed. So, if anybody wants to find out more information about Kantar Mobile, feel free to email me. It's just guy.rolfe@kantarmobile.com. Or you can come through the kantar.com main corporate website. And of course, we look forward to meeting as many people as we can when we're at the MRNW in Kuala Lumpur. And I would implore you to come along and see what's being talked about.
That's right. So you
join the discussions.
Absolutely. Go and join these discussions. If you happen to be in Kuala Lumpur, or you're planning on being there, January 29th to 31st, obviously you'll hear Guy and his entire team involved in this, not his entire team, but a good portion of them speaking at this, releasing some pretty pertinent and relevant research and information. And I look forward to this. And Guy, I thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your time. I'm glad we could connect and at least give a glimpse into this pretty amazing space I don't know how it happened, but this amazing space at the epicenter of the new gold rush and new oil rush, which is data collection and dissemination. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
We have been speaking with Guy Rolfe, who is the global mobile practice leader for Kantar Mobile, which is under the Kantar Group area. Really appreciate his time. I really appreciate your time, guys. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, thank you so much for listening to this. If you have any feedback of this or any other episode that we've done on Untether.tv, please reach out, rob@untether.tv, and we will be back for another stellar episode coming up soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hey, Guy, thank you so much for doing this.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.